4 years ago, I made an embarrassing, overwrought, scathing quote-unquote critique of one of the most popular, influential, critically acclaimed, not to mention controversial games of all time. Needless to say, this upset a lot of people, and with most of my points holding little water or merely dancing around what could have been a concrete analysis in favor of instead sidetracking into the philosophy of the issue at hand, looking back at the view counts in the dislike bar, I can't help but see it as something of a missed opportunity. With the notoriety and good fortune gained from my comparatively balanced yet still amateurish and stumbling analyses concerning the previous titles in the Elder Scrolls saga, if I'd taken a step back, replayed the game with a clean mindset and thought about it more carefully, I could have steered the discourse surrounding the game and that of my channel in a more constructive and helpful direction. So, let's attempt to rectify that. After almost 10 years of letting this landmark cultural phenomenon digest in the hive mind of mainstream gaming discourse, the test of time has proven again and again that the immense, seemingly inexplicable sticking power of Todd Howard's magnum opus, at least if you're investing your definition of greatness in terms of pure sales figures, bows and secedes to no rival. You still see ads for this thing to this very day. It's utterly insane just how strongly this game has endured throughout the last decade, echoing throughout the stone walls of the industry's yawning crypts like the moaning ghost of some ancient dead warrior. A colorful description that feels all too appropriate given the mythical pedigree of Skyrim's popular image in Western culture. The famous image of the Dragonborn facing down the camera in a power stance atop some craggy mountain, the backdrop of the province falling off behind him while churning smoke from a dragon, wyvern's nostrils, envelops him in this mythical shroud, surely still occupies a huge number of gamers' desktop wallpapers, no doubt frequently repurposed into some sort of eye-bleeding collage of mishmashed iconography from some other popular game. Maybe it's a soldier from Battlefield or Mario or just some chick with massive tits. So what praise is to be given, what blame to be reflected onto for Skyrim's immovable object of unrelenting cultural influence? Was it the impeccably unique and gorgeous art direction, grasping the coattails of and paralleling the simultaneous popularity of Game of Thrones? Suffice to say, by no mere coincidence. Even with its influence rendered transparent by my blood-curdling powers of clairvoyance, the love shown to its aesthetics is nothing to sneeze, cough, or fart at. In fact, that's probably this game's main boon. The live-action cinematic trailer alone was enough to propel its brand of visual gospel up to the clouds. The ennui of Skyrim's variety of visual intrigue shone brighter than even the sun itself in the cursed year of 2011. Fus Roda, blah blah blah. It practically superseded YOLO. I absolutely hated it. But take a moment and try to extend all 5 of your toes trying to count the number of other RPGs that, say, took place in an Arctic tundra. That one Game of Thrones thing? This game? Icewind Dale? Never heard of it. The Game of Thrones comparison doesn't end there either. The game satisfied a need in the media landscape for low fantasy political drama, gritty partisan squabbles couched in whatever was happening in the world at that time. I don't know, Sexy and I Know It was dominating the charts at the time of release, so the world was already in a pretty grim place. Not to mention the rage comics, the dubstep, and to a lesser extent in talks around the office water cooler, Skyrim was probably mentioned in the same breath as speculation over whether Osama bin Laden was dead or not. Even so, where are the cloaks? No wonder the wet and cold mod was so popular. What's the point of a western dark fantasy game where you can't cosplay as Ned Stark? You know what? For posterity's sake, let's just pop the old girl in and shit. You don't need me to tell you why the intro sucks. Even people who like this game can acknowledge how it's staggeringly just so not like the rest of the game in its tightly controlled pacing and suffocating linearity. At times, it seems like the scripted moments are having a gross wrestling match with the game engine. There's a sort of unsettling cognitive dissonance at play when you have to wait for a real-time cutscene to play out in the middle of one of Bethesda's RPGs. Just watching some boring, bearded fuck walk across a room to activate something makes my balls grow cold. I always end up shooting fireballs at a wall, or reading an ebook, or taking a lap around the block while I wait. But the great thing about these games is that after you finish up the painful tutorial, the world opens up in a big way, as in, you're free to go anywhere you want, which isn't exactly normal in games, at least not to this degree. There's no barriers, you don't have to move through the different areas of the world in sequence. It's not tied to your level or your story progress, and you're given total and absolute freedom in exploring the province from the moment you leave Helgen. So you go, and you start walking, and you stumble upon this little hamlet. You feel like you stumbled upon it. Really, there's only two paths to follow after you exit the cave, and the other is an easily missed offshoot partially obscured, but you probably won't realize this your first time. There's like 5 buildings in the town, which isn't a lot. It's this minuscule little ramshackle settlement, hardly believable, but it's one of many. The quantity sort of makes up for it, but they're all the same. And when you do what needs to be done in Riverwood, you're organically guided in the direction of Whiterun, but it's only like a short jog away. This brings to attention something very important, the subject of spatial abstraction, which Skyrim and the other 2 games before it rely heavily upon. To demonstrate the concept of what I have coined spatial abstraction, let's look at a game that foregoes the concept. Let's say Final Fantasy X, which I talked about in the last video. It doesn't really matter. There's a lot of games that take this approach towards depicting a world in a video game with limited resources. Final Fantasy X's city of Zanarkand feels massive. It's this sprawling, alien-looking metropolis. Its visage is fleeting but awe-inspiring, the scope of it carrying this grand, dizzying sense of scale. It truly feels the size of what a real-life equivalent would feel like. Its intensity is real, palpable. Let's not mince words here. The city is allowed to feel huge because the game doesn't need to let you explore 100% of it. You're delegated to confined spaces and see the rest of the city in the background. Your imagination simply fills in what the game itself can't convey directly. Skyrim takes a different approach. Like Morrowind and Oblivion, Skyrim, as it is shown in-game, is almost like a miniature model of an actual country, a microscopic diorama that you could jog across the perimeter of during your lunch break. Whiterun's outer walls outline what could be the spatial dimensions of, say, a Walmart. Not even really. Like one of those tiny Walmarts that only sells food and paper towels. There is a clear distinction here between asking the player just for a moment to believe that the sprawling city clawing out over the horizon isn't just a JPEG file, and asking the player to believe that the Jarl of a laughably tiny settlement with a grand population of 74 is allowed to have any serious stake in the country's political climate. You get the idea playing these games that you're supposed to be imagining these places as a lot bigger than they actually are, a lot farther apart than they actually are. But it's never made clear, never explained, never even lampshaded in any way at any point. Maybe there's a book somewhere giving an actual population size that I haven't read because fuck that, but man, it completely takes me out of the experience. The characters living within these walls are hard to believe too. You don't really get the sense that you're intruding on their daily lives as you take quests from them. Your path crossing with theirs for a brief moment out of millions in the grand scheme of their storied existences. You instead get the impression that they're just sitting there, pushing their dickhead into their foreskin and watching it pop back out like a turtle head, just waiting for you to walk into their weird, creepily empty house so they can tell you to run some asinine errand for them. The game reserves actual personality for only a select few of its more important characters, and everyone else just sort of serves to fill space, mess with things, walk around, and reveal bizarre personal details and life problems to you like, well, the kind of people you'd run into at a Walmart. It's creepy, and sort of gives the feeling that Skyrim is the site of some bizarre government-funded program to isolate a bunch of mentally handicapped people to see how they would develop and form their own society over a few decades or so. I wouldn't say centuries by any stretch. The country just seems kind of underdeveloped. You can't imagine it having a very long history. It just feels a bit quaint, kind of hard to take seriously, although many do take it very seriously. Although the Elder Scrolls lore buffs tend to focus mostly on what we don't see depicted in the games, and more so what the fanbase has gathered from secondary reading material and such. Bro, you didn't read volume 82 of the Draconian Chronicles? You clearly have no idea what you're talking about. Well, buddy, I got 2 words for you. I ain't got time for that shit. I'm sure the lore is cool, I don't know. The story taking place in the games themselves are never allowed to get too complicated or interesting, just by way of how limited the engine is. They all have to operate in these unbelievably limited confines, necessitated by this aggressively modular, all-purpose sort of everything engine. You have to be able to converse with each and every character in the game, so the personalities of the individuals within the world are spread thinner than, something that's spread thin. Jelly. Skyrim is like a peanut butter and peanut butter sandwich. You have to be able to walk into any house you feel like, so none of them can be too interesting on their own. Where's the jelly? Is it in this guy's house? Nope, just good old Harold Jorgbarger, just standing around. This sandwich is soggy as hell. You hardly even register all the loot you pick up in the dungeons. It doesn't even matter all that much because there's not all that much you need to buy. I hardly ever bought anything in this game. Without a considerable investment in the persuasion or mercantile skill, or whatever they changed it to in this game, you're gonna be paying unbelievably exorbitant prices for the most asinine objects imaginable. Like, there's a lot of variables to account for in Skyrim's economy, most of all the one variable where none of it makes any sense, and these variables are kind of an afterthought now that I'm looking at them. There's no printing press in the world of Skyrim, obviously, so books would have to be handwritten by a scribe, and there's only one actual library in the entire province. This should mean that reading would be a luxury afforded only to the rich, like it used to be in our own history, but most books are worth, what, like 3 to 15 septims? Less than or equal to a flagon of mead, or a goblin's nutsack, or an infinitely more precious seeming actual magical crystal harnessing the soul of a wolf. Talk about badass, but with how easy low-level soul gems are to come by, you'd think that people use them as letter openers. Nothing holds up to scrutiny in this world. It feels like a complete waste of investment because nothing seems to matter. You're never going to encounter a quest you're unprepared for because, by virtue of the game's central gimmick, almost every quest has to be readily accessible to a level 1 player. You're not working towards any greater goal, you're not unlocking anything new besides skills, armor, and all the garbage you run into on adventures and end up decorating the tables in your house with, which I should mention could be fun if it didn't all fly off the shelves every time you return home. And the best looking set of armor in the game is the iron set that's on all the promotional material, but by the time you reach level 5 or whatever, you've already moved on to the vastly superior steel set, which is also pretty cool looking, but from that point on it's just tier after tier of this clunky, awful looking bullshit that just seems more impractical than anything. Surely whatever defensive benefit this dwarven whatever you call it confers is not worth the extra load. Why would a slightly stronger material better protect you from, say, fire magic? I think you'd just be boiled alive in the metal, am I wrong? Actually, now that I remember, RuneScape of all games realized this and incorporated that very idea into its gameplay, and it was kind of interesting. Imagine if certain classes had glaring weaknesses against certain types of enemies or certain types of damage, but then also had some sort of exploitable advantage against other types. But no, you have to be a jack of all trades. You're not going to get far if you're an archer running around with no sword on your back. No matter what type of build you have, no weapon, armor, or item is off limits to you, and this means that every playthrough is going to be woefully similar to the one before it. I can't help but think these games would be massively more replayable if they started incorporating more hardcore classic RPG elements. The Witcher 3 tackled this issue to great effect, perfectly imbuing specialized armor sets and skills into an easily accessible mainstream context, and I haven't heard anyone complaining about it. Also, good luck playing an alchemy build in Skyrim. I tried once. The excitement wore off after I realized that the only way to progress that skill to an even minutely useful degree is to craft hundreds of useless, pointless potions and poisons until you've unlocked enough perks for it to be worth a single solitary damn. So many afterthoughts, so many missed opportunities. If I had to sum it all up in an easily digestible conclusion, Skyrim's amazing degree of player freedom and staggering amount of granular interactivity is rendered nearly inconsequential in light of its misguided attempts to flesh out its gameplay, not by creating deeply involved systems, but by running around like a toddler on Adderall, placing one poorly thought out gameplay element here, one boring, truncated storyline there. When people say Skyrim is an ocean with the depth of a puddle, what they mean is that Skyrim completely fails to offer any compelling outlets for investment. You cannot and will not lose yourself in the realms of spellcraft, or the ways of the sword, or the tumultuous political climate, because it's all just going to be spoon-fed to you automatically if you just do what it tells you to do. Take the one path that anyone who ever has played it in history will invariably follow, led along like a child on a leash by this game's insulting unwillingness to let an inch of its intimately crafted fantasy world go unexplored. Go to High Hrothgar right away, no dilly-dallying sport. Travel to Bleak Falls Barrow post-haste, bitch, or else you're gonna have to go without one of the game's most useful and interesting combat abilities, even if you've already traveled to, cleared out, and explored every nook, crevice, cranny, and corner of it 60 times already on previous runs. No, it's not all bad. Yes, you're allowed to like it. No, it's not objectively worse than any other game because objectivity is a myth. This is my subjective opinion. Your opinion is also subjective and subject to change like my own. You're not stupid if you like it. Of course, you don't just have low standards. You simply see something in this game that I don't, and you should feel free to write your opinion out in the comments. Try and convince me otherwise. I crave perspectives that directly oppose my own. They are the most interesting because they are not the same perspectives I have already thought about for the last decade. The game has massive popular appeal. Clearly, its lore has captivated a huge audience of passionate fans, and the sheer breadth of discussion it's managed to provoke on this channel alone easily justifies its existence. The modding community that I lampooned in another video holds untold universes of intrigue for countless enthusiasts, not to mention helping to inspire and build an exponentially growing community of self-taught developers that might never have discovered their passions if it weren't for this game. So get out there, let your voice be heard, and enjoy whatever you want to enjoy. If you enjoyed this and want to enable me to make more like it, click the link at the end of this video or in the description box. I would love nothing more than to do this full time and quit my shitty day job, but I simply don't have the time or means to do so without your support. Pledging to me means you'll get access to an entire library of scripts, old and new, that never made it to video. So if you like my writing enough to want to enjoy it without the visual component, there you go. You'll also get access to high quality, ad-free downloads of all my existing videos, as well as a few that aren't available anywhere else. You can also follow me on Twitter or join my Discord if you want to talk directly to me and my other followers. I hope you enjoyed the video enough to like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more and don't forget to leave a comment if you have something to say. See you later, gamers!